professor aqui do Insper, de cidades urbanas e mobilidade, trabalhando no Laboratório aqui Futuro de Cidades, com o núcleo de mobilidade urbana, principalmente com o Sérgio Aveleda, que infelizmente não pôde estar aqui hoje, então estou substituindo o Sérgio. É um prazer estar aqui nesse evento.
Bom dia a todos, meu nome é Keiichi Arasaki, é um prazer muito grande estar aqui com vocês hoje. Tenho aí 30 anos de tecnologia da informação, sou diretor de tecnologia na Tata Consultancy Services, responsável pela área de soluções industriais. Muito prazer.
Bom dia, eu sou Paulo Moura, né? Eu sou coordenador do Núcleo de Cidade Inteligente do Laboratório Arc Futuro aqui do Insper. Também sou pesquisador nessa área, tanto de mobilidade como de cidade. Olho muito para a questão de resiliência urbana. Em mobilidade é um dos temas. Eu coordeno também uma share sobre carro autônomo, território e carro autônomo, veículo autônomo, tudo que mexe dentro da cidade, a gente tem condições de automatizar. E a gente vai falar hoje também aqui, acho que a Sofia, ela vai entrar para falar com a gente, trabalha numa empresa chamada PTV, que cuida da parte de simulação, né, de fluxo, e o professor Arne, que é de St. Gallen, que vai participar com a gente. E como a gente vai falar do futuro da mobilidade, né, o professor Arne hoje ele teve um pequeno probleminha de família, está dentro do trem ainda, e a rede no trem não está tão boa. Então, né, a gente já começa a viver a vida real, né, a vida como ela é. Eu acho que exatamente, é importante. Ele está na Suíça, né, e a rede não é tão boa da conectividade. Então, a gente tem que entender. E aí, às vezes, o pessoal me pergunta, mas o 5G faz sentido? A resposta, faz, porque a vida hoje, ela mudou, né? Então, acho que vale a pena a gente incluir a professora, a Sofia, não sei se ela vai entrar agora ou não. 4 minutos ela entra. Então, a gente vai começar a discussão ao contrário hoje. A gente está com os especialistas aqui, a gente vai falar um pouco do futuro da mobilidade, e depois a gente escuta o que o professor Arne vai falar com a gente. Então, aqui eu pergunto para vocês, né, quando a gente fala do futuro de mobilidade, então, nosso convidado aqui na casa, aqui, a gente discutiu um pouco essa questão, e a gente fala muito sobre a eletrificação de frota, a gente fala muito hoje sobre a questão da transição da mobilidade, para uma mobilidade mais sustentável. Mas, além disso, o que tem além dessas questões que a gente já escuta aí na mídia sobre a mobilidade?
Com certeza. A gente tem visto bastante, né, a falar do carro elétrico, né, veículo elétrico, ela tem ganhado relevância, primeiro em função da combate à poluição, e segundo aspecto são as pressões, né, que estão vindo aí da agenda de decarbonização, que é muito importante, né, para aí melhoria do clima no mundo. E aí a gente tem pensado bastante em relação às condições necessárias para a introdução do carro elétrico, né? Se a gente apenas trouxer o carro elétrico importado, sem pensar no ecossistema necessário, né, sem pensar muito na infraestrutura, você iria ter uma subutilização desse recurso, né? Ele se comportaria como se fosse um componente eletrônico, um dispositivo eletrônico, e aí a gente teria as mesmas dificuldades que nós hoje temos, por exemplo, com o nosso celular, que a carga da bateria você tem que estar monitorando, né? Ela pode estar baixa no final do dia. Então, imagine isso para o veículo. Então, a questão é, como que então viabiliza isso? Através da criação do ecossistema. A gente entende que essa pressão, né, essa iniciativa, ela vai ser puxada pelos veículos de marca, né, marcas de luxo, que vão ter condições de trazer e implementar esse ecossistema. E o que seria esse ecossistema? Primeiro ponto é usar a inteligência artificial. Ele vai ser parte tão integrante das pessoas, né, que ela vai conseguir acomodar algo que hoje é difícil, né? Essa mudança de paradigma. Imagine que hoje quem tem um veículo, ele vai para o posto de gasolina ou de combustíveis e gasta apenas 15 minutos, 10 a 15 minutos. A gente vai mudar completamente esse paradigma. Você vai ter que ser muito mais organizado, criterioso, mas a tecnologia vai estar vindo para ajudar. Então, ela vai entender os seus hábitos no dia a dia, ela entende que você ao redor do meio-dia, vai almoçar em determinado lugar, então ele já sugere que ali se faça a recarga. Então ele entende os hábitos, dependendo dos hábitos de cada um, seja ele estudante, seja ele alguém que utiliza o carro o dia todo, então ele começa a fazer essas sugestões ao longo do dia. Se ele for uma pessoa que viaja longas distâncias, ele vai entender, ele vai quebrar a viagem em vários pedaços, né? Ele facilita o trabalho que hoje seria quase que um esforço de planejar uma expedição. Se você vai fazer uma viagem, você tem que descobrir onde tem postos de recarga. Então, esse é o primeiro aspecto que o ecossistema de inovação vai poder trazer. Existem diversos interessados para trazer isso. Ele tem que estar integrado com o veículo, né? Esse é o primeiro ponto. Outro ponto é que ela vai mudar um pouco o cenário urbano, né? Não vai ser mais como nos postos. Os postos vão existir por muito tempo, né? Especialmente ao longo das estradas, isso vai continuar existindo. Mas nas áreas urbanas, muito provavelmente é o posto que vai chegar para você, ele que vai chegar no seu condomínio para poder recarregar à noite, ele que vai chegar no seu estacionamento onde você trabalha para poder recarregar, ou naqueles lugares onde a gente para eventualmente, por exemplo, o mercado, ou na escola, uma academia, onde ele vai passar 1, 2, 3 horas, é suficiente para fazer algumas recargas. Isso leva também a um outro ponto. Talvez vai surgir um novo mercado aí, que é de gerar energia. A gente está vendo o setor elétrico sendo renovado no mundo todo, né? Isso já foi feito no primeiro mundo. Portugal já fez há uma década. No Brasil está começando esse movimento. Hoje 30% já está no formato de mercado livre, mercado aberto de energia. E isso vai chegar para todos nós. E o que é o mercado aberto? Vai ser um cenário onde a gente vai poder trocar de provedor de energia como a gente troca provedor de internet. Ou seja, eu posso pedir no dia seguinte um outro provedor. E nesse cenário, a gente vai ter gente gerando energia, como, por exemplo, painel solar, como, por exemplo, o veículo. Então, nesse caso, você vai poder vender energia. De novo, eu estou falando do ecossistema, porque alguém vai organizar para que aquele estacionamento todo esteja tecnicamente preparado para gerar energia nas redondezas, né? Eu estava fazendo uns cálculos, isso é significativo? Sim. Cada veículo é capaz de suprir energia para uma residência até 6 dias no Brasil. Nos Estados Unidos, coisa de 2 dias para um veículo médio. Então, isso vai ser amplamente utilizado, né? Então, isso vai trazer interferências até nas cidades. Por exemplo, é possível que a gente tenha grandes avenidas onde vão fazer recargas ou rodovias. Já existem protótipos desse tipo, né? Em que você tem algo como um trilho escondido debaixo do asfalto que você vai estar puxando energia, como se fosse um trolleybus ao contrário, né? Você faz essa recarga. Talvez isso venha fazer parte do cenário urbano, né? Essas são as grandes mudanças que eu vejo de imediato, né? Existem outros aspectos que eu vou comentar depois, mas que eu vejo de impacto assim chegando nas nossas vidas.
Não, é interessante você escutar isso, porque quando lançou o celular, né, em 2007, né, quando a Apple lançou o primeiro iPhone, é importante guardar essa data, porque 2007 foi ontem, né? E quando chegou o celular mesmo, que a gente escutava, mas para que a gente precisa de um telefone celular? Né? Então, eu acho que quando você começa a pensar na mobilidade, quando você fala do carro elétrico, do carro autônomo, do futuro, aí às vezes a pessoa fala assim, não, mas isso aqui não é realidade. Bom, mas o celular também não era, né? Então, como que vai ser? E aí, Adriano, eu pergunto para você, quando a gente fala dessa questão da sustentabilidade, dessa questão uma nova forma de mobilidade urbana, né? Essa questão do carro elétrico que a gente trata, mas vai além do carro, né? Você consegue ver alguma coisa hoje do que você faz de pesquisa? Como que você vê essa questão da mobilidade além do carro?
Bom, acho que nessa questão da mobilidade elétrica, acho que tem as implicações também para o lado do transporte público, né? Acho que o carro é o único bem que a gente compra para deixar ele parado durante 90% do tempo. A gente usa um período específico, ele fica parado a noite inteira, ele fica parado a maior parte do dia, a gente usa ali para ir e vir 1, 2 horas por dia. Isso traz facilidades em termos da questão do abastecimento, que realmente do veículo elétrico, o abastecimento ele é muito mais longo, mas no campo do transporte público e da logística urbana, isso não é verdade. Os veículos de transporte público de logística urbana, eles circulam muito mais, eles estão em uso praticamente o dia todo ou a noite toda. Quanto mais você rodar, mais você está fazendo o payback daquele investimento. Então, se os desafios já são grandes para o transporte individual, para o transporte público e a logística urbana são ainda maiores. Acho que a indústria está respondendo a isso, acho que a tecnologia está avançando muito. Hoje, as barreiras principais para a eletrificação da frota de transporte público, eu diria que é muito mais financeira e institucional, contratual, mas os incentivos e as pressões para que seja para essa transição tecnológica está acontecendo, né? A SP Trans anunciou essa semana que não circulam mais novos ônibus a diesel em São Paulo. Então, isso já foi uma promessa na década passada. Acho que a SP Trans, a Prefeitura de São Paulo, aprovaram uma lei dizendo que iam renovar a frota num horizonte muito ousado, que acabou não acontecendo. Na verdade, a gente teve pouquíssimos novos ônibus que começaram a circular que não fossem a diesel. Essa lei acabou sendo revisada. Agora a gente tem uma meta um pouco mais adequada para um processo de transição que vai acontecer. Isso é fato. E aí isso significa um processo de renovação dessas empresas que prestam serviço de transporte público, que vão ter que ser mais... elas fazem muito o feijão com arroz, né? No sentido de estão acostumadas àquele tipo de tecnologia, aquele tipo de indústria, aquele tipo de fornecedor, ao sistema de abastecimento, a forma de funcionamento das garagens. Isso tudo vai ter que ser revisto. E a gente vai precisar de algum apoio público também para os investimentos. A gente já vê que a operação no longo prazo de frotas elétricas de transporte público já está equacionada, a gente já tem, no longo prazo, ele já se paga em termos de operação, mas o investimento e o risco envolvido ainda é muito grande. E o que a gente olha em termos de experiências internacionais, né, a China é o grande modelo, não diria o grande modelo para a gente, mas é a grande referência de um processo de transição que aconteceu de forma muito agressiva, com condições muito diferentes do que a gente consegue proporcionar, mas a Colômbia e o Chile são dois países que estão fazendo um bom trabalho em termos de renovação, criando incentivos corretos para a renovação da frota, pelo privado, pelos operadores, e a gente vê uma grande transformação na estrutura de operação em si, nas garagens, na forma de operação. Então, é realmente uma revolução para o setor de transporte público. Para o setor de logística também, acho que o de logística já está avançando, responde muito mais, né? Como diz o nosso companheiro Sérgio Aveleda, o setor de logística é muito flexível. Se você, quando a gente regulou a carga urbana, a circulação da carga urbana aqui em São Paulo, e restringiu muitos horários de funcionamento e de operação, de entregas e o porte dos veículos que podem circular na cidade de São Paulo, rapidamente o setor de logística se adequou. A gente pode questionar se foi de forma mais eficiente ou não, mas rapidamente ele se adequou para fazer chegar. E agora com a pandemia, então, faz chegar no dia seguinte. E se a gente restringir mais, no limite a gente vai ter carga urbana sendo distribuída em porta-mala de Uber, que é o que acontece hoje em algumas cidades chinesas que têm uma restrição muito grande à carga urbana. Então é um setor muito flexível, que se adequa muito rapidamente, mas que também tem todos os desafios, né? De operação, de circulação durante o dia, durante a noite, e a recarga é um deles. Mas eu queria só complementar a partir da sua provocação, Paulo, que eu acho que não só a eletrificação ela traz oportunidades e desafios no veículo, na tecnologia embarcada, mas ela traz desafios também em termos e oportunidades em termos das estruturas urbanas que hoje funcionam em função de um padrão de automóvel que a gente tem. Então, os postos de gasolina são espaços que vão ter que ser repensados. Os locais de abastecimento são espaços que vão ter que ser repensados. Esses espaços nas rodovias, eles vão ter outra função, porque você vai chegar lá, você vai ter que ficar lá um tempo. Então, vão ser novos usos que vão surgir. E eu diria que, emendando aí num tema de sustentabilidade, mas de forma mais profunda e de baixo carbono, a gente tem que pensar não só a mobilidade de baixo carbono, mas também a gente pensar na acessibilidade de baixo carbono. A gente não está falando só de tornar a mobilidade mais eficiente e mais sustentável e com novas tecnologias, mas a gente também tem que olhar para o lado dos destinos. No final, a mobilidade ela é um meio para a gente atingir certos destinos. E isso é a ideia de acessibilidade. A gente tem trabalhado cada vez mais aqui no laboratório, vamos começar agora uma pesquisa de acessibilidade de baixo carbono. Isso envolve pensar a mobilidade, envolve pensar também onde as coisas estão e onde as pessoas iniciam suas viagens e até onde elas querem ir na cidade.
Interessante, né? Porque a gente começa a falar de eletrificação, então da eletrificação a gente vê que não é só uma pequena mudança, não é só o carro elétrico que chega, não é só ligar na tomada, né? Tem uma mudança de comportamento. Essa mudança vai ser acompanhada também do ponto de vista de logística e de transporte público. Você invocou um ponto importante, que é a questão do carro compartilhado, né? Que é a posse do carro, né? Quando a gente fala dos 3 zeros, né? Zero acidente, né? Zero emissão e zero posse. Né? E a posse do veículo vai deixar de ser um ativo, né? Eu não sei se vocês também lembram, eu gosto de passar do passado, né? Mas aqui no Brasil teve uma época que comprar a linha de telefone e alugar era uma fonte de renda. Né? Eu acho super interessante isso, né? Quando você conta isso para alguém, a pessoa dá risada. Você diz, não, mas você comprava uma linha de telefone e depois você alugava, você alugava uma linha de telefone. Né? Você consegue imaginar uma situação dessa, e não faz tanto tempo assim. Né? Então, quando a gente pensa que alguém compra um carro hoje, né, o que vai acontecer com essa compra do carro? Né? A gente estava discutindo aqui sobre a questão da Vale do carro compartilhado, né? Então, o carro compartilhado, ele veio também nessa solução. A bicicleta compartilhada também veio nessa solução. Então, de repente, o nosso comportamento vai mudar, porque eu escutei que a gente vai mudar o comportamento, que a gente tem que mudar, o ecossistema vai ter que se adaptar a ele. No transporte público, na logística, a gente já está falando de mudança de comportamento. A gente está falando de parar de olhar a mobilidade, mas começar a olhar a acessibilidade. Então, de repente, a gente também, do ponto de vista de inovação, vai tratar isso. Né? A gente também vai mudar de comportamento. Então, quando eu penso hoje no sistema de telecomunicação e eu olho um telefone, porque qual que é a grande força que tem um telefone celular hoje? É a rede de inovação em volta dele. Né? É a capacidade de você prestar serviço através de uma plataforma. Então, a discussão agora é, na mobilidade isso pode ser real ou não? Né? Por que eu tenho que entrar no carro e escolher a minha rádio? Por que ele já não sabe que eu quero aquela rádio? Né? Por que eu tenho só 20 aplicativos hoje dentro de um sistema aberto de montadora? Por que eu não tenho um sistema aberto de inovação dentro da ferramenta? Então nós vamos colocar o Google dentro do carro? Eu não sei, de repente pode surgir uma outra alternativa ao Google que vem do mercado, né? A gente tem visto algumas empresas automotivas mudando a forma de fazer. Né? Eu tive recentemente com o pessoal da Renault, eles estão mudando o processo de produtividade para o processo de serviço. Eles lançaram uma empresa chamada Mobilize, que fala sobre compartilhamento de carro. E eu não estou falando de qualquer carro. Estou falando aqui de carro de todos os níveis de logística, carros, né, para cidade, de pequeno porte, de grande porte, para né, você fazer grandes viagens. E essa flexibilidade está trazendo um movimento onde você não tem mais. Eu estou falando, né, um carro para uma pessoa, mas um carro para N pessoas, que é o compartilhamento. E agora eu vou inverter a conta. Ao invés de você ter um carro para atender todas as suas necessidades, você pode ter diversos carros para atender suas necessidades de maneira diferente. Né? Porque não necessariamente você vai querer andar com um carro esportivo 2 lugares para fazer supermercado e buscar as crianças na escola. Mas de vez em quando você vai querer andar com ele. Né? Você vai querer andar com um carro, alguma picape para fazer uma trilha, mas você não vai querer andar com ela na cidade. Então, de repente, você também pode ter a alternativa de escolher carro. Né? Hoje, deixa eu ver com a roupa que eu tô, deixa eu ver que carro que eu vou sair. E isso pode ser uma opção. Né? Ou não sair de carro, né? Também tem essa opção. Terminar, porque muitas vezes a gente está preso no carro, o carro parece uma bola de ferro no nosso pé. Não sei se vocês têm esse sentimento, que dá vontade de sair do carro, largar o carro e ir embora. Né? Aqui em São Paulo, esse sentimento ele aflora quase todo dia, né? No trânsito. Assim, principalmente quando você está no carro, você vê alguém passando de bicicleta. Aí você fica olhando e fala, por que eu não peguei a bicicleta, né? Então, esse movimento passa por uma mudança de comportamento. E como que o sistema de inovação vai se endereçar nisso? Né? Então, assim, acho que agora eu gostaria de convidar a Sofia. Acho que ela tá...
Well, Sophia, are you here with us?
Sofia, you are mute. Okay.
I don't think so. I just change it. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Great.
So welcome, Sophia. We are today talking about the future of mobility. Thank you to join us, to share with us was your point of view. Here we start the discussion a little bit further before because we have connection problems, but we had discussing here about the change, the change of the behavior of people. The ecosystem that should be adapted to the new solutions, energy, the electric cars, the autonomous car. We spoke here about logistics, about public transportation, and from your point of view, what's the future of the mobility?
Oh, that's a big question, right? First of all, good morning, everyone. I'm Sophia Salek de Brown, and I'm very, very glad to meet you here today and to have this opportunity to exchange knowledge and experiences with such a great participants and attendees. So to answer your question, I prepared some slides that I want to share with you. During that, because of technical issues, I will turn off my camera, okay? And so in order that you can see the slides in a smoothly way. That's okay for you?
Yes, perfect.
Now, 1 second, takes a little bit. Okay. Can you see something?
Yes, your slide is there.
Okay, great. Then we can start. Then let me briefly introduce you PTV Group. 1 second, if it worked. Where I work for. So PTV Group was founded over 43 years ago and as a spin-off of the Technical University of Karlsruhe. And it has developed into the world market leader for transportation software for traffic and logistics. And we have over 900 colleagues at 28 locations. So we are represented in all continents. And as PTV has its origins in science, we continue to have strong ties with it, which is why we work with many universities and are involved in several research projects. Our headquarters is still in Karlsruhe, Germany, which brings me to a very interesting fact. As Karlsruhe is the birthplace of Karl von Drais, who in 1817 invented the first prototype of the bicycle, known as the running machine. So this means that the bicycle is more than 200 years old. But in my opinion, more up to date than ever. So having said that, we cannot talk about the future without looking at the past. And this is London in 1894. If we look at the mobility, what do you see? A lot of horses and carriages, right? And a lot of people, a lot of traffic, but the only difference is that instead of cars, there are horses, right? It's not easy to find, but there you can see wait a minute, I'll change this to here. So there you can see a car, one car. And actually there was a study done about this time in London that said, with the way the population is growing and the way the traffic is growing, population in cities will not survive because there will be too much feces and urine from horses. The disease will proliferate and most people will die. So horse manure was the main topic at the world's first international urban planning conference. But 20 years later, in 1914, this was the image of New York. It was overtaken by cars. And now you struggle to find a horse-driven carriage there. So that means in the space of 20 years, a new technology, which was the internal combustion engine, revolutionized the way that we move completely, almost from day to night. And we know, so before that, the average distance from where people were born was 15 kilometers. Today, you know, we can travel all around the world. So this technology changed everything, and not only mobility. And I believe that today we're also in the middle of such transformation. So, but it's not one only single technology, it's a number of technologies that are digitizing mobility and the way we are doing things. And at PTV, our slogan is we are the mind of movement, and a forward-thinking organization that is willing to explore things, but like in every successful exploration, it's not enough to have only one mind that paves the way, but strong partners on your side. And for us, it's the case that we work with the International Transport Forum at the OECD. The ITF is an intergovernmental organization with 59 members countries where all transport ministers come together. We collaborated with the ITF and world-leading companies from the automotive and digital sector. And we selected the city of Lisbon to analyze the effects that new mobility services will have on our cities. So we wanted to do a study to try to find out what would be the impact of replacing all vehicles with shared autonomous vehicles. We introduced this type of vehicles, a 4-seater autonomous shuttle that would take people and do exactly the same trips that people were doing. So it was very similar to an Uber, where you wouldn't have to wait more than 5 minutes for a vehicle to come and to pick you up. So a very high level of service, very similar to the private car. While doing this study, we kept the high capacity public transport in the metro system of Lisbon. And so with that, we realized that we only needed 10% of the existing vehicles in Lisbon to serve exactly the same trips in 24 hours. So, okay, there was a difference in the peak hours, you needed 30%, but it's still 2 out of 3 vehicles in the city of Lisbon that do not need to be there. So that was quite interesting. And imagine what would happen to parking, right? You would have a lot of free parking. The result was freeing an area equivalent to 210 soccer fields of land that would be available to reallocate these spaces for better quality of life in the city. And but not all is good news. The study showed also that the vehicles, although they take more people, they tend to travel more kilometers than today's cars, causing more CO2 emissions because of the need to pick up and divert to pick up the passengers. No, this rerouting. So we needed to do something. And yes, you could electrify the fleet, which is a possible thing to do. But as I mentioned before, regarding public transport, we only kept the metro system in this study. So we should consider the public transport, meaning the bus back into the system, which is what we did. We chose this type of bus. Oh, I got that. So, are you still hearing me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, sorry, because I got some message in my screen. So what we did was we chose this type of bus, which is an 8 or 16-seater bus on demand, but would be slightly different service. So you have to wait 15 minutes, 15 minutes window to pick up the bus, and you will have to walk up to 300 meters to a bus stop, to a virtual bus stop, and not a real one, but it would really help in the rerouting. And with this system, we were able to reduce everything by half. So meaning we only needed 5% of the existing vehicles in Lisbon. We will reduce 22% of the travel kilometers and reduce 27% of CO2 emissions. So it proves that there is a huge potential for cities if this would take place. And we have seen over the years that this is starting to take place. This analysis was also done in Oslo, in Dublin, and in Auckland, and reached very, very similar results. So it's also a big opportunity for cities to really implement a green strategy and to look at the future in a much more comfortable way without having to build huge infrastructures and not having all the focus just on cars, but start to follow the rhythm of people. And continue our travel in Lisbon, one of the findings was how this new mobility comes to also help solve the problems that you not only have today, but problems that you maybe will have in the future. Sometimes when you don't see the problems, you find solutions when you less expect. And this is a picture of Lisbon. And as you see, the street is very hard to walk. I know from my own experience, especially in high heels or with strollers or suitcases. As you can see, they have, these stones, this pavement is giving some difficulties in the city of Lisbon. So this is for sure a source of immense pride for Lisbon people, but at the same time, a clear safety hazard for pedestrians. And a lot of people were getting hurt by walking through Lisbon. So that's why together with the city of Lisbon, we did analysis and tried to find out why this was the case. So why the pavement was such an issue. So what we did, we decided to analyze where all the trips and falls were happening in the city of Lisbon and what was the relationship with this type of pavement. And actually, when we did the analysis, we find out that almost 96% of the incidents were happening in front of bars and restaurants. So when we matched the damage of the pavement together where the people were hurting themselves, we realized that it's too much. So that was damage to the pavement in front of bars and restaurants. That was the problem. And we wanted to identify why is this the reason, why this happened. And the reason is because every bar and restaurant needs deliveries every single day. And because in Lisbon, there is not a lot of space for those deliveries. So the drivers, they were attempting to minimize disruption of traffic. They tend to park like these trucks here with two wheels on the pavement, and this basically damaged the pavement, and that was the problem. So how do you solve the problem? It means with an urban logistics strategy, maybe you could also solve a problem of pedestrian accessibility in Lisbon. And since we are evolving and mobility is evolving, and now in Lisbon, you're moving towards electric trucks to do these deliveries like this one. But what is the main characteristic of these electric trucks? They are heavy and they cause even more damage. So is there any solution to the problem? Yes, there is, but I want to come back to it at a later stage. So we stay in Lisbon. And Lisbon, as any city of the world, is following to be a smart city and have a vision for the future. And it has a lot of opportunities and possibilities that can be taken forward, like the one as Portugal ran by chance, 4 days completely on clean energy, being the first country in Europe to do so and breaking a clean energy record. So with this, they realized that it was a huge opportunity. So Portugal started to wanting to transition and realized very quickly that mobility was very dependent on petrol and oil. So how do we make that transformation, right? They started to invest very early on this. And they took the opportunity that came with Uber. So, Uber wanted to get in Portugal, but the taxi drivers started getting upset with Uber, and Portugal had to regulate them. And so they promoted a law on Uber under the condition that Uber has a share of their fleet with electric vehicles on clean energy, and it should be the cheapest way to ride. So being a few cents cheaper under the traditional UberX. And it was the first time that it was happening in the world. So Portugal implemented a nationwide charging network, really super user-friendly. So there was the first electric mobility network operating in the world. With only one card, it's possible in Portugal to charge a car with electricity supplied by any retailer at any charging station in any city. So a very user-friendly, good practice. And of course, with those transformations, they start having a lot of electric mobility, like scooters, and with all the negative aspects that came with them. But it was an important experience to understand how these systems are working and how you can manage it in the best possible way. Then they started to regulate them, of course. to organize them into zones where each zone had a number to allocate them, and the operator would then have an hour to move them around to balance the availability throughout the city. And of course, they realized that all this new mobility became very popular, but public transport was still something that needed to be taken into consideration and needed to be the backbone of urban mobility. So they realized that the price for public transport was not the best. So they decided to cut the monthly pass to 50 euros for the metropolitan region and 30 euros within the city. And a pass for a family cannot cost more than 50 euros. And with this pass, you can travel anywhere with any public transport system. At the same time, all the people that own this pass, they get 30 minutes for free to try any of the shared mobility offers that are in the city. So in order to understand that different modes of transport are complementary and not fighting with each other, right? And at one point in Lisbon, before the pandemic, there were 17 operators of shared mobility. And with the reduction of cars in the city center that was achieved as a result of the different actions and measures implemented, this enabled the city to rethink and to rethink of all this big space that is allocated to cars and it's not needed. So that created an opportunity and enabled this area to be converted in a big urban park, and also to help in reducing the temperature of this area and counteract the effects of climate change, such as flooding. This green infrastructure also supports biodiversity and provides an ecosystem to the city, including air pollution mitigation and space for recreation, right? It's one of the biggest and nicest park in the city at the moment and has been built last year. And of course, it also enables to think about the pedestrianization of the city center. And so it's a clean zone. It's not prohibited to traffic, but it has to be zero emission vehicles that enter there and only shared mobility vehicles. So with your private vehicle, you cannot enter this region. And that would mean in reality that would have one of the biggest pedestrianizations in Europe and only be able to, like I mentioned, access by zero emission public transport, which would also include Ubers. That has not been concluded, but it's in the plans to be done. And of course, led to the growth in public transport, shared mobility, and as a consequence, less cars. It gave a big boost to active mobility and allows the city to introduce the right infrastructure. But on the other hand, as also a consequence of this action, some of the existing infrastructure was not longer needed, like car parks that became not so used. There were big car parks like this one that are currently more or less empty, but that led to another idea. You see this tower here on your left-hand side? So that's the picture from the top of the park house. So you can see the same tower. So they converted the car park into a bar restaurant. So a tourist place having a fantastic view to the city. And it enabled to rethink the ways that parkings are used also for space that city really struggles, like this example for tourist opportunities or even places for sports, like football places that are built on top of car parks. And being so many car parks empty, another idea that raised that maybe in the future, this empty building could be used as a last mile logistic distribution hubs. That packages can be delivered with e-bikes or with small electric vehicles. And so you can solve the problem that I mentioned at the beginning with the pedestrian accessibility and the delivery. So all this information will help you solve different issues that you maybe are not even aware. And in our aim to be forward thinking, we also collaborate in Lisbon with Volkswagen at the world's first pilot project for traffic optimization using a quantum computer that took place during the Web Summit Technology Conference in Lisbon. So the idea was to pick up people in the city center of Lisbon and then take them to the Web Summit, which is in the other side of the city. And the vehicle just drove according to the quantum computer was calculating as the best and fastest route to get there. So, and it was the first time in the world where a normal bus from a bus company was driving without a fixed route and without the driver knowing where he was going. And yes, of course, in the near future, there will be cars, taxis, drones that will deliver but it's all about the intelligence and understanding how things work with each other. And that is the important thing in the future of mobility. It is about being able to coordinate and interconnect things. And the key for that is planning technology, of course, and it allows you to test different scenarios before implementing, and so achieve clarity to improve mobility, considering all individuals and their specific mobility needs. And we should also reflect on our actions in promoting a mobility transition towards a model that cares for humans. No? That's why speaking about the future of mobility, I cannot remain without mentioning the gender aspect, even if only briefly. But mobility is not gender neutral, but instead shaped by the male perspective, right? The mobility patterns of men and women we know are different. You see here also in the pictures. All over the world, women are frequent and regular users of public transport and active mobility. They make more daily trips, but travel shorter distances than men. This is because women's majority often work closer to their houses and are more likely to be employed in part-time or to work in low-paying jobs. And in many countries, they are less likely to have a driver's license. And as a woman continue to be the primary caregivers, as you also see here in these pictures, they are more likely to link or chain trips together as a result of bringing children to school or going to the doctor with them or with other relatives. So, and documented research also reveals that more than 80% of women and girls worldwide experience harassment in public. So 80% of women are afraid of being harassed in public transportation, which has a significant impact on their access to opportunities and their quality of life. More than 90% of sexual harassment on public transport goes unreported. And the majority don't report because they have fear of being further embarrassed or targeted again, and often compounded by a lack of trust in the police and the judicial systems. And in the absence of representative data due to this underreporting, this becomes to an invisible problem, I would say an open secret that everyone knows but does not recognize as an issue significant enough to merit any particular intervention. So we all know that a lack of safe and secure transport reduces economic opportunities, reinforces poverty, and increases inequality. And considering this, decision makers and planners must rethink on how their interventions are contributing to the idea of women as equal citizens and the right to free and safe mobility in the city. And that's why it's essential to include gender awareness in the infrastructure and mobility projects. Yes.
Thank you very much for all those things, but I think we need to welcome Arne will talk with us as well.
Okay.
So if you can finish in 1 or 2 minutes, or if you can just wait with us to discuss a little bit further.
Yes, for sure. So do you want me to continue doing with the presentation, or should I stop?
I think if you can wait with us, I think so you can stop and we talk a little bit about that later. Because
okay, great. Don't worry. Okay, thank you very much. I will do that. Okay, don't worry.
Okay, so thank you very much. I think it's really nice just to hear everything that we spoke. Bring a really nice perspective, and when you come back here to the group, we talk about mobility. The future of mobility, we talk about people behavior, innovation ecosystem, different approach, adaptability, but we don't talk about mobility anymore. We don't talk about just the car. We talk about air quality. We talk about life quality, urban heat, urban design. So I think we are changing the way to approach it. Okay, so thank you, Sophia. So hey, just to welcome Arne to talk with us. Arne, you are mute.
Hello, everybody.
Welcome,
Hello.
Arne.
Hello. Bom dia. Bom dia a todos da Suíça.
So, Arne, the floor is yours.
Tá bom, tá bom. Ok. Obrigado por me receber e pelo seu interesse. Preciso me desculpar por não ter tido tempo de traduzirmos transparentes para o português. Então, vou mudar para o inglês. De qualquer forma, a maioria dos meus slides são cheios de imagens, então sugiro que você veja a apresentação um pouco como um filme e que façamos uma sessão de perguntas e respostas no final.
Arne, eu vou pedir para você, Arne, eu vou te deixar 20 minutos, eu vou ser chato com a Sofia, eu peço desculpa já, né? So, Arne and Sofia, I apologize for you because I will be the annoying people here with the time. So we have 20 minutes and then we start to discuss a little bit more, okay?
Tá bom, tá bom.
Thank you.
Vai estar rapidinho. No, that's the wrong presentation, sorry. One moment, please. Sorry. New share. Resume share. Here's something that isn't working. Sorry. Sorry, something is not working the way it should. Stop share. I need to launch the share again. So your screen sharing is paused, it says. I don't know why. Resume share. No, sorry, I have to log in and out again. There's something that's not working.
Professor, perhaps because we can see a pop-up saying that you have to click twice to start presentation mode. Maybe you want to click twice in the middle of a screen.
And the full screen I will try. No, but it's not the document. It's not the document I'm sharing.
All right.
Sorry, I'll have to I'll have to leave and log in.
Okay, so in that case, you can. I don't know if Sophia is still there.
Yes, I'm still there.
Yeah, so before I have this technical issue, I can just ask you some questions about when you talk about the gender accessibility, or when you talk about the quality, the air quality environment, the improvement of cities. So you talk about shared mobility, you talk about the sidewalk, autonomous vehicles. So how do you see the modeling of the systems that we are modeling today? How the cities are using that? So you see one city, or did you see that in like a trend in several cities? How to organize that? How cities are looking at it, in your point of view?
Yes, so I see a big difference for sure in developed and developing countries, right? It's also a question of resources and how much is there to invest in infrastructure, in reallocating spaces and so on, and how you choose your priorities, right? Here we have the Paris Agreement, there are some goals to meet, and that's why the states and the cities has to contribute with their part, right? I'm originally from Bolivia, and so my mother language is Spanish, and I also understand Portuguese, I must say. And so I see the differences with my home country, right? And that they are struggling, they are growing too fast and without right infrastructure, and there is a lot of informal public transport that has to be regulated. So that's the difference that I see, no? But by the end, depends what do you want to change, with new mobilities do you want to introduce. I think it's always the first step to simulate these changes and these improvisations in order to know, okay, like for example, in this Lisbon study, so we always say you only can model for a technology for the next 30 years, but not in the case of active mobility. That will always be a trend. But for sure, if you want to move people to active mobility, like riding bicycles and so on, then you have to have the right infrastructure, because the subjective perception of the humans is the most deciding topic on that. You know, if you are not feeling safe, then you are not going to use that, right?
Yes, no, that's true. When you talk about people see different kind of things, so an autonomous shuttle, I can share the experience with you. The first time I was in the car, 60 kilometers per hour, and the cars, they just pass between two cars, and in my opinion, didn't fit. So, but for the car, they calculate everything and they just pass. So they don't brake, they don't do anything, and the perception was terrible. And I was testing. So that's true. That's true. So Sophia, I think Arne is there. I think Arne, are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready. So now I need to.
Now you have 15 minutes, Arne.
Okay, good.
Professor, now
okay, you see it?
It's working.
You see the slides?
Yes, perfectly well.
Good.
Thank
this
you.
Is good. Okay, what I want to talk about in the next 15 minutes is how mobilities, we talk a lot about technology, we talk about mobility, but what is very important, if we want to get people out of private cars and we make an overall more sustainable mobility system, is to understand how we got to address urban design issues, the space, policy and governance issues, and blend that with technology. So this is what I'm going to talk about in the next minutes. So basically, as I said, it's the constraints and the opportunities given by the evolution of the built environment, and then also I'll share about some experiences that we have here in Europe, especially how we integrate novel forms of mobility, meaning shared mobility, carro compartilhado e outros, how we integrate them into fixed line transit, into bus systems, into train systems, and other things. So generally, to say, we don't like cars too much in this country. We have a very aggressive programs to bring down road accidents. In a couple of years ago, 2016, we had 216 people killed in a whole year out of 8 million inhabitants. So that is a very aggressive number, and we are policing cars very, very intensively. If you speed, for example, in the city of Zurich, more than 15 kilometers inner city, if there was a 50 kilometers per hour limit, you will get a minimum of 1 night in jail and a fine that would be superior to the equivalent of 6 mil reais. So this is a very hard stance on cars in Switzerland. And then if you do it again, there's a confiscation of the vehicle. Even illegal parking or overstepping parking limits is tremendously expensive. But on the other hand, what we do is a heavy investment in public transportation, which is in a couple of years back, I calculated the number in reais. It's around 1,500 reais per capita that we invest in public transport. And with the current value of the reais, it's probably more close than to 3,000. So let me talk about 5 meta drivers of future mobility. The first is suburbia. Urban sprawl is what started of course in America, in North America in the 1950s and 60s. It's greedy for land, time, for energy, for lives. And what used to be a dream, the American dream, is now like a little bit of a nightmare, and we need to rethink territory, spaces, and function. The second thing is that data is the new oil. So what we have with the big malls, with the big box retail, with the shopping centers, all that as we know it is in the state of decline tendentially, and mall appear as dinosaurs of a bygone era, and an IT-driven service economy is taking over gradually. And so the delivery van is sort of the new impact of the shopping mall. Then something we really need to understand and deal with is informality. If you look at Mexico City, for example, 90% of Mexico City is built by non-architects. And the deficits in governance appear as a main driver for the emergence of informal urbanism. Now, retrofitting infrastructure, especially transport infrastructure, is always a major headache. So we know how to deal with informality and how to find a good balance between formal and informal planning, because informality also in transportation has quite some assets that we can leverage there. And the fifth, finally, is social housing. To understand that, you know probably that in Europe we had very big dreams about social housing in the 1950s and 60s, and some of those also emerged in nightmares. We've got riots. They became ghettos. These buildings, and so there's a little bit of a lack of basic resources and political stability, but also, and this is important, very often it's a lack of infrastructure, because these buildings were built in sites where people got marginalized, and an access to mobility is a basic necessity if we're going to get beyond that. And finally, we need to learn also in Europe and in North America and in Asia from what happens in the global south. And now a nice example is the urban cable cars, Teleférico Urbano, which is one of the rare examples where technology really developed in the global south and then was transferred to the rest of the world and the north. And this is something we need to have more examples of these. What you see on the left, these ideas have always been around. The left picture is a hand-painted aquarelle from the 1950s for France, where they wanted to build La Défense in Paris, and they already thought about urban cable cars. But you all know that the real things, they emerged in for example, in Colombia and in La Paz in Bogota. So there's a couple of things that are really important to consider, and not only think in classical values. So what can we learn from the whole things, and what is the key constraints? Well, the first and foremost is urban space and the efficiency in the use of space. And that's the biggest problem with the car. The biggest problem with the car is not even its emissions with modern cars. The biggest problem is its use of space, because cars sit 23 hours out of 24 generally on average, and they sit somewhere and they take up very valuable urban space. And now new infrastructure to build is very expensive in space and time. We know that this is an example here from Zurich. These things cost a lot. This is an example from Jakarta, Indonesia. You see really the traffic jam on the bridge, and the platform that is black with people, as we call it, it's really full. So we need to plan on time, and then we need to come up with creative solutions. If you look down there, it's a picture I made in Jakarta, Indonesia. What you see, the only vehicle that is advancing is the blue BRT bus, which is on its fila prioritaria, on its priority lane. And then what you have to complement that and to access the stations is passenger bridges that are built locally, very simple design, just with a roof against the sun and the rain, and they take people from one city quarter to the other. So if you already have those roads, the question is, what do you implement to fix it? The second is the cost of time. Let's remember that already in the 1890s, the elevated railway in New York City, that later became the subway when it was put underground, was carrying 405 million passengers per year. So that is really the cost of time that was always there, and that was always whatever class and whatever job you have and wherever you belong to. And finally, what is always underestimated is comfort. This is a picture from one of these buses that brought commuters from Long Island into Manhattan already 15 years ago, with Wi-Fi and the stewardess bringing your coffee. Because if the offer is comfortable and safe and secure, people will follow and people get out of their cars. But this comfort and security and safety factor is often forgotten. And then we need to understand, I said it before, informal transports, how we blend them with formal transport. This is a picture from Muscat, Oman, that a couple of years I made these pictures. They didn't even have a bus system or something like that. It was all these little mini buses, combi style, Toyota Hiace vehicles, with that can seat up to 12 people. And then they basically follow a route, but they can deviate from the route to adapt to where the passengers precisely needs to go. So that is already a good mixture between a formal and an informal system. And this is things we need to learn more from. Another good example is the metro of Dubai. Which has, as you see on the upper left, it's all very classy, it's very quality, the way it's made, it's clean, it's really nice materials, it's all marble. And on the upper left, you see it has a first class with an attendant in a gold jacket that serves the passengers that pay a premium. So we need to come up with imaginative solutions and really come up with novel ideas. Now, if we look at our cities, we've got this trend towards hyper-compact convenience stores, these super little stores where you can do everything. They've got the big advantage that once you have this store, you have the whole area animated, and it's very good for transportation users and public transport users on the opposition of these big box retail things that do not work, that where you basically need a car to get there. So how did we get there? Let's look very quickly. Of course, in post-World War II, there was the Great American Streetcar Scandal. There was the decommissioning of the urban rail systems in the United States. And 1935, 90% of US population relied on public transportation. And you know how it is today. There was this kind of conspiracy by National City Lines, General Motors, Standard Oil, and Firestone Tiles that bought the defunct rail system and converted them to bus use in order to be able to sell buses and tires. And the result is that we all know this. I don't need to go into the detail. It's suburbia, it's the highways, it's public transportation that became transport for the poor and those that have no other option. And then the limits of growth eventually became visible, you know, with this essay by the Club of Rome, and then we get there. And this is the problem today. How do you want to serve this with transit? How do you want to do this? This is impossible. So we need basically a different paradigm in urban planning if we want to get there. Again, for a reminder, the directional molds, Victor Gruen, the architect from Austria that emigrated to the US that created the strategic impositionings of the mall, with the result of the inner cities like downtown Los Angeles becoming ghettos. And it's only now that they are able to revive that. So the age of free parking. That free parking, Donald Shoup is a researcher on parking, probably the most prominent. He once said it's a fertilizer drug for cars. In 2012, 99% of US automobile trips ended or started in free parking spaces. So this tells it all. This is what we need to get around. And what you have here on the other side is that the transit bus has a social stigma. It's considered transport for the underprivileged and the poor. And this is what we need to get away with good ideas. Now, how do we do this? One of the things is vehicle sharing that we do heavily in Switzerland. So the idea is here that several conductors share a single vehicle, and it works well up to 1 to 18. So we have here in Switzerland or North America in some cities systems where you have a car sharing car that substitutes 18 private cars that it takes off the road, that people do not need to care for, that people do not need to buy. And what we do in Switzerland is we integrate it with public transportation, which then really gives it the advantage. And this is the interesting thing to do. And we have those large scale models, experiences, and case studies. So basically there's two models. There's the models where the cars sit in specific points of a street network where you can take them and put them back. So these points, of course, can also be railway stations, for example. And then then there's the so-called free floating, where you can put them in any parking space within a given perimeter. This second system was thought to be the future 10 years ago, but it didn't prove to work very well because people they want to know where the cars are and they want to be able to book them before. So how do you integrate that? This is a picture from the railway station of Lucerne, and you see all these red cars are shared cars. We've got 3,000 of them in 8 different classes, from a smart car to a big van. So, and here you see how they are distributed. Please consider that all this surface on the lower part of the picture basically is highly alpine space, which is uninhabitable. This is where there are very few vehicles there, but you see that they're in all the big cities. And if we superimpose that with the national rail and bus network, buses are yellow and rail is red, then you see that they basically are in all the major rail hubs, and they are fully integrated with public transportation. So we also have a roaming agreement with neighboring countries. And what we generally do in this country here in Switzerland is we integrate all transport into one ticket. So the mainline railways, the long distance trains, the local trains, the alpine buses, and the rural buses, the water transport, the boats on the lakes, the cable cars, and the urban networks. They are all integrated in one set of tickets. And this ticket can be a cardboard ticket like 100 years ago. It can be a ticket on your iPhone, or it can be what you see in the lower rail corner, a pass that gives you access to the whole network, unlimited for 1 year. So this is what a lot of people have, because then you don't need to think about mobility. You just get on any mode of mobility, and we get you there. And you see these logos that appear on the tickets that basically show and reflect this integration. And now, a couple of years ago, we migrated this whole ticket system. Basically, I mean, the tickets are still available, but most people now have an electronic card, a pass, which gets checked electronically on the train or on the bus by the conductor. And it also serves for opening the car sharing car. So you can book a car on your smartphone, and you can open it with the same pass where your ticket is on the train. You can put your ski ticket on it on the mountain. You can put your gym on that. So that's like a national fare media. And this works very well. We've basically been doing that for over 100 years. I mean, the idea on paper to have all transport integrated in one ticket was always there, but it should be as easy as pressing the button on the door of the bus to get up there. Taxis are very expensive in this country, which is a bit of a problem. On-demand transportation like taxis, you need a lot of money to take them, but we're working on that. What we have is these what we call self-driving taxis, again, which is the car-sharing cars. And here you see pictures, they sit exactly right next to the platforms very often at the rail station. So you get off the train, you get into that car, you can rent it from 1 hour until 1 week, basically, and then you get there. And if you see at the national level, what you have beyond these little logos is the number of cars that are available. You see it's 3,000 all over the country in rural regions and in the cities. And if you look at, for example, the main rail lines, you see that they're really aligned with the main rail corridors so that they really sit in the stations. If you break it down to a local level, like here in Zurich, this is where I'm speaking today from, you see that there's one basically at every second street corner. And this is what gets people out of cars. This is what gets people out of cars. Then people don't need a private car anymore. And we get the cars out of our cities and we can use the place for kids playing, for restaurants, for social activities, for businesses. We can use that for everything else. But it's important of how you do it. And I'll just kind of give you an idea of that. Here's an example in St. Gallen. You've got really 20 meters to the train. Here's in the airport in Geneva. I've been there today. It's 300 meters to the check-in desks and 100 meters to the airport train station. So it's really important. Here you've got a drop-off space where you can just leave them if you don't want to search for a parking space. Again, the airport in Basel, we had a free-floating system there. And the most important thing is this intermodality, the cooperation between all transport actors in terms of a seamless travel chain, which includes bikes, which includes walking, which includes public transportation and shared cars, and maybe sometimes also even private cars. And you have to align the fares, you have to align the tickets, it means you have to align the financing also. So basically it's an economic problem. And if you do it right, for every dollar you invest in that, you get $1.10, $1.20, $1.30, or even more back for society on a global scale. So this is very successful. And if you look at those cars in detail, this is an example from Geneva. We've got the logo of the local tariff community. This would be like in Rio Ônibus or something like that, or Integração Tarifo Integrado. See, you have that on the car, the logo, so it shows it's not a car, it's a self-drive public transport vehicle for you to drive and to rent on by the hour. And the very important is also to have these cars visible. Here you have them in Zurich. This is kind of 100 meters from where I'm speaking. You have them on the street space so that people don't need to get into parking lots or something. They can just take them on the street, put their car down, open their smartphone and drive away. And today you can do it all on your smartphone. So we've got quite good growth rates in that business. And of course, at the end of the day, what we see here is a convergence with all those new modes. Bikes become shared, trips become shared, cars become shared, e-bikes become shared, cargo bikes, and at the end of the day, we have demand responsive transport on autonomous vehicles. So that's the convergence point. Autonomous vehicles, as you know, for the past 15 years, we've always heard that it's going to happen in 5 years. I'm a little bit pessimistic by now, but I think by 2030 we'll probably have them, and then we can share those cars and we can automate them. And the second thing, very quickly, if I may have 2 more minutes, that is ride sharing, which we shouldn't make up. Ride sharing means that you fill up seats in a car that is empty. That is not the same thing as car sharing. Ride sharing existed when the Montgomery bus boycott happened in Alabama, Montgomery, Alabama in 1955, where Rosa Parks, she's become very famous. She boycotted, she refused to get up from her seat because there was a racial segregation on the buses, and she sparked off a boycott of the bus system, and the black customers walked and the people of color walked, or they shared private cars. And this is how ride sharing basically came into existence. And what we have in ride sharing today is on one part we have ride hailing, which again is not to be mixed up between you and us. I never heard of anybody making $10,000 a month driving Uber, but that's a different story. But it's very important to distinguish the share economy from collaborative consumption and from the platform economy. And the share economy is ride hailing or car sharing, whereas the platform economy, that would be, for example, things like Uber. I'll go very quickly here. You know that there's been these wars, but it's very important, even if we talk about Uber, to reminder that the core thing that we need to talk about is urban space. Here are 200 people in 177 cars. Here are those people without cars. Here are those same people on 3 buses, and here they are on 1 light rail train. So that basically tells it all of how we can deal with our cities and how we should do that. In San Francisco alone, they had just before the pandemic, in San Francisco, downtown San Francisco, 48,000 TNC cars, which is Uber and Lyft and comparable. They did 170,000 downtown miles per day. And if you see the hotspots of the pickup and the drop-off zones, you see that they're exactly the same spots where the public transportation systems is very good, very well developed. The blue lines are the trolley buses, the greens are the trams, and the red, the greens are the trams, and the red is the metro, basically. So this shows that it's a very efficient. And then the problem is, if you have all these Ubers around, then at the end of the day, the buses, which are really zero emission, then you have them stuck in traffic, which is also not the idea. So we need to ask the real questions. Streams of small road vehicles, even if we talk about automation, they cannot replace streams of big vehicles. And the stream of traffic jam of electric cars is still a traffic jam. So how do we deal with that? How do we deal with societies? And putting people just in small capsules in autonomous vehicles in the future is not the silver bullet. It's not land efficient and it's not space efficient. So we need to kind of understand what changes we need to make in land use policies and urbanism, and how we need to transfer what we learn from transport science into governments. And this includes to ask what the price tag is for premium service, how to incorporate technologies to integrate new sharing technologies with high demand modes such as buses and trains, and how we assign time slots on the infrastructure, who has the right to go where, when, and what to prioritize at what time. So we need new urban metrics, basically. And if I may look out there, if we look at Asia Pacific, the Philippines, or again, this is Jakarta, this is how a crossroad looks in Jakarta. You see even the bus rapid transit bus on the left is blocked, because from the phase of the signal before the semaphore, or the phase before already, the crossroads is still blocked, right? On Shanghai, before the pandemic, on a Wednesday night, 22:35 on Wednesday, people cannot get up the escalators to out of the metro because there's so many people, right? And then what do we do with the urban space? It's a good idea to have food trucks on car lanes. Probably yes, if you do it in the right way. How do we share bikes? How do we put in the organization on retail logistics? In Singapore, I'll just finish in a minute. And in Singapore, for example, IKEA doesn't have a garage. People come by taxi and they take their things away by taxi. It works. It works very well. And then what do we do with the pricing of the roads? Again, we can learn it from Singapore. They've got the fourth generation of e-pricing system. So you see, basically, there's a lot of societal things that we need to discuss. Who has access to our cities? Who has to do it when? These are old ideas that have been around for quite a while, but we need to renovel them and think about new uses of urban space. And I'll leave it here. Thank you for your support. And I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you very much. So it's quite overwhelming. A lot of questions here. I think this can pop up. Yeah. So I just leave the floor for you. We don't have a lot of time, but I think you can make some few questions.
Okay. So thank you, Arndt and Sophia, for your amazing presentations. I have a question to Sophia, maybe to start. Do you think that a global infrastructure, including communications, IoT, and regulations, are side by side, or at least close to the EV industry? Or what do you see as the biggest challenge to allow a broader environment for electric vehicles globally?
I think she's not connected. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, she leave it. I'm so sorry. So, Arndt, can you?
Okay, I can respond to that. I mean, probably again, the whole idea is, where do we get at the end of the day with our mobility and our needs? And yes, of course, we need to decarbonize. We need to put charging stations, for example, in strategic fields. But then again, do we just replicate the model that we have today and kind of exchange the cars that we have today by electric cars? Or do we really want to make it better? And then also the question is, we need to align it with infrastructure, because we can do things like V2X, we can do bi-directional charging, so kind of prevent a blackout or something by supporting the power grid in a way, by making, for example, electric battery vehicles accessible. But then on the other side, also, if you have too many people charging their vehicles at the same side, again, you can destabilize the grid very easily. So we also need the trains and other buses, for example, or trucks even, that are connected constantly while they work to the grid. And this is one of the reasons why among the electric buses, one of the most progressive things that are there is not battery buses, but the trolley bus in its new version, which can go 40% of its time offline and needs only wires on 50% approximately on its own. It's like a system that they have in Sao Paulo. So the modern version of that is one of the best electric bus systems from a sustainability and an economic point of view. So we need to really make, what I want to say is a broad analysis to really understand where we need to go. And the societal goals needs to be first, then comes technology. Technology needs to serve the societal goals. The society today very often serves technology in social media or other things, but that is probably not the best idea with looking forward. So we need to define what technology needs to do. The good news is that technology pretty much these days can do everything we want from it, but as a society, we need to formulate the questions. So that would be a short answer to a big question. It was a very good question.
Thank you very much, Arndt. So I'm sorry, guys, but I think we overwhelmed the time here. We start to manage that, but it's quite difficult. So if you want to write down some questions after, we can send to them, to Sophia or to Arndt or to us here. So thank you for joining us here. Arndt, thank you very much for your time. Very much for your explanation. Muito obrigado.
Tchau. Obrigado. Um prazer.